Hello and welcome back to The Movies Made Us Do It. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm pretty sweet. Not so bad at all.
Excellent. I am very well. I'm looking forward to today's show.
Good.
Because we're talking about one of my favourite films of all time. In my top 5 favourite films of all time.
You picked this one. Usually it's either me or a process of both of us. But you
Yeah. I just said, why don't we do The Exorcist? And you were like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Like, great.
Yeah.
So this week we're covering The Exorcist. Like I said, this film for me is in my top 5. If I had a top 5 movies, it's in there. For
overall movies. Oh wow.
Yeah,
okay.
of all time. Yeah, I'm never sure on my 5th movie, but Alien, Blade Runner, The Exorcist, and the original Godzilla. And then sometimes the 5th one's King Kong, sometimes the 5th one's something, I don't know. The 5th one changes depending on my mood, but
I think that's the thing is
Ridley Scott does well out of my top 5.
Yes, I know. The same here. I mean, we did like a top 10.
Oh, it's changed. I'm sure it's changed since then.
And that's it. That's what I was going to say. I think there's only one constant in mind, and that's the number one. It's always Blade Runner. I think it's the only constant in my top 10s.
I would say in mine the one absolute constant, which I'm sure even if we went back to that old top 10 we did on the movie show all those years ago, would probably be Alien. Yeah. I'd imagine Alien's in there regardless. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It does change over time. But
yeah, and I think things move around as well. I mean, because I think Breakfast Club has moved around from like top to bottom on numerous occasions for me. So, but that's always in there. But
if I'm in the right mood, then obviously Tron's in there. It could be in my top 5 just for enjoyability. I really enjoy it. But The Exorcist, I think, is just one of those. It's one of those movies, almost like Blade Runner, where it's like, even if I didn't like Blade Runner, I could watch it and just be like, but it's an incredible film. Like whether I like it or not, there's so few of those movies where you can kind of take your enjoyment out of it and just say, well, even if I didn't enjoy this film, I could happily sit there and say, this is a masterpiece. Even if I hate it, it's a masterpiece. And that's how I feel about The Exorcist. It's one of those films. It's just so well made.
I think that's the thing. That's one of the things about this movie over almost any other horror movie of a similar type. It's that it's a genuinely brilliantly made, brilliantly acted movie.
Absolutely.
And it's done with such sort of care, attention, and detail that I think almost any other exorcism movie I've ever seen doesn't have.
Certainly not to my mind. I think this is the, I guess widely regarded and rightly so, king of the Exorcist movies. Yeah. Not just the Exorcist series, but movies involving exorcism. This is kind of the one. Now it's obviously directed by William Friedkin, who weirdly more known for comedy around this time, aside from The French Connection. And then came out with this.
French Connection was his big one, wasn't it? It was the sort of one that kind of properly made him of thing.
I think was the film before this. I think it was his previous film.
I think you're right. Yeah, which again is actually a really good movie.
Amazing.
Even though I'm not. I don't like Gene Hackman. It is a great movie.
Yes. Famous for its full speed car chases and things like that.
Yes.
Great movie. And it's written by William Peter Blatty. Now, I've not read the novel. You have.
I have, yes.
Blatty, sorry, yes, Blatty.
See, I probably like most people who watched the movie and read the book, I did both of those things way too young. I did it way before I should have. And
I definitely saw this before I should have, that's for sure.
Yes, and I think the book, obviously, it goes into a lot more detail and a lot more things.
Sure.
And it's, there's a few scenes that are way more graphic and way more intense. But I think both are fantastic. The book is a really great book, actually. It's really well written, and you can see why it made such a good movie, I think. Because to be honest, I don't think there's much in the book that isn't really in the stuff is altered and there's left to a certain degree, but I think overall it's mostly in there.
Yeah,
there's no sort of, like, huge deviations.
Right. I mean, I know in some ways there's more in the movie than the book, because I know that from what I understand, the Iraq scene, which we'll get to momentarily, in the book is very short, whereas it's kind of almost 10-15 minutes in the movie. And it's really let's get to it. Let's just talk about it. So the movie opens. The original cut of the movie opens in Iraq. I think the director's cut doesn't it open in Georgetown, then cut to Iraq? I think it does like a panning shot, then cuts to Iraq.
I think so.
But I don't know. But the version I watched this week opens in Iraq.
I think the version I watched as well is the one that opens in Iraq. So
and we have Father Merrin, played expertly by Max von Sydow. Who plays an elderly Catholic priest. Was Max von Sydow ever a young man? He always looks old, like just always.
If you go back to,
he's got one of those faces, though, hasn't he? You know.
Yeah. If you go back to have you ever seen Seventh Seal?
I don't think I have actually.
It's 57. He looks very young in that.
Okay.
Really, I think it's the only time he's ever looked young was in Seventh Seal.
Yeah, he's just got one of those faces, hasn't he? Like Alice Cooper. He's just like he was born looking old and but then never seemed to age after that.
Never aged past the certain age. Like unlike, I think, like the opposite is, well, not the opposite, but the person who always looked decrepit was what's his name? Death Wish guy.
Charles Bronson.
Charles Bronson always looked really ancient.
He did.
Even when he was young, he looked really ancient.
Yeah, even when he was in the prime of his career, he looked like an old dude. Yeah.
Whereas I think Stallone always even though he looks older, he always has a sort of certain youthfulness about him. Which I don't think, which works really well in a lot of his roles, I think.
It definitely does.
And obviously he was aged up in this. They did have latex makeup to make him look older than he was. Because I think he was he 40? I think he was in his 40s when this came out.
I will say the makeup looks good. Like I was watching it in high def and it looked fine. You look at some stuff like Back to the Future and things like that. The age makeup.
Doc's makeup is not good at all.
Not so good. You can see it kind of ends before the neck and you can see the seams. This looks fantastic. And it's funny because now we know what Max von Sydow looks like at that age, and it was pretty spot on. It was pretty much they nailed it.
Not much difference, no.
No. So he's an elderly Catholic priest who's at an archaeological dig in Iraq, and we get these wonderful scenes in Iraq, which, like I said, apparently in the book isn't very long, but I love. It's some of my favourite scenes of this film. The Iraq scenes.
The reason why it's longer in the movie is mainly because it's visual. It's because of
it's all visual.
The absolutely stunning shots of the desert when you have him stood in front of the statue of Pazuzu. It's like that. Yeah, absolutely. Because you can't really do that in the book.
No, of course not.
That's all in your head, isn't it? So it's
absolutely. And this whole opening, like I said, is about 10-15 minutes long, and it's all subliminal. It's all almost completely void of dialogue. There's some brief dialogue, but for the most part, it is just visual, and it's absolutely stunning. We've got that blood red sky, and they, funnily enough, going back, although they did it in a much more cartoonish way, as you'd expect, but going back to the previous film we looked at, Raiders, you have when they unearth when Father Merrin unearths the Pazuzu head, we get that foreboding wind blow in, and that's kind of spiritual wind, which is great.
Pazuzu is actually is a god of wind, apparently. So
he's also the bringer of disease and sickness. And I was never sure.
That explains a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I was never sure whether they just got lucky with the shot when he unearths the statue, the head, that a fly lands on him, and I was like, that must have been by accident. You couldn't have possibly planned that back then. And it's not digital. It's obviously really there. And you're like, wow, that must be the luckiest shot ever that you managed to get that. And then we get that kind of, that orchestral score mixed with the sound of flies or something. It's like a really unsettling sound. A lot of the opening of this film is just unsettling sounds, because then once he's got the statue, the head of Pazuzu, he's obviously really deeply disturbed. And he's sat in this outdoor bar, and you get the sound of the ironworks, the pounding of the metal and stuff. It's just very visceral and very
the sounds do such a good job of making you unnerved. It does a really good job of that.
And very long shots of seemingly random people just staring at Father Merrin.
Like he's completely out of water, isn't it? It's one of those sort of complete fish out of water job.
Yeah. Then of course we get the near miss with the runaway horse and carriage.
Yep.
And then we have the scene where he meets one of his colleagues, and the clock stops mid-stroke.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you'd seen a different cut then. I was like, wait a minute, did I just make that up? I'm sure that happens.
No.
Yeah, so the clock stops mid-stroke as they're discussing the statue, and then you've got that incredible shot of as you said, the statue of Pazuzu, the sun behind it, and he's just stood there. And what I love about that shot is that it makes no sense.
No.
And that's why I love it. I love it because it makes no sense other than some kind of spiritual or otherworldly power. The building is rubble, and on top of the rubble is this perfect statue of Pazuzu, completely unharmed around everything else. Everything else is destroyed, and this statue stands proud. And this is probably like one of my favorite shots of the film, actually. This shot of Merrin in front of the statue is amazing.
Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. I mean, and also, it completely sets up the whole idea that, this creature is going to bring like death and destruction,
and he knows it,
and it will stand over everything, sort of thing,
And he knows it. Merrin knows. Like, you can tell when he's in the market, it's like, this is not good.
Well, I think it's irrelevant because it's not part of it. But I've not seen the prequels, either of them.
Don't.
But he does deal with Pazuzu in that, doesn't he? I think
he does in Africa. Now. So yes, now that is like canonical. I think is that even mentioned in the book that he'd previously met or fought Pazuzu elsewhere?
Honestly, I haven't read it since I was a kid, so I don't remember.
I'm not entirely sure. It could be kind of seen in either way. If you're watching this without the prequels, then it can just be seen that obviously he knows who Pazuzu is, and he feels that foreboding and that horror. Or it could be seen the other way, where, if you take that prequel into account, or if that was in the books, or maybe it's mentioned in the film and I missed it, the fact that he had already confronted Pazuzu in Africa, it can be seen as Pazuzu kind of goading him and saying, we're going to do this again. We're going to have this second.
Didn't get rid of me the first time.
Yeah, time for the rematch. And then you have got the sound of the ironworks and the steel. It's almost like a prepare for battle.
Yeah.
Like Pazuzu's preparing for battle. It's like a wonderful opening. Absolutely love the opening in Iraq. It's only short, but it's just such an impactful, and it's such a wonderful display of visual storytelling with very little dialogue.
I think that the first time I watched it, I actually was like, what is this? Why are we watching this old guy?
But that's because you watched it too young, like me. I did the same. I was like, what's this? I thought it was about a girl in a bed.
Yeah, it's like, where the hell are we getting into The Exorcist? What the
Yeah.
hell's going on with this old dude in Iraq? Why are we here? It didn't make any sense the first time I watched it.
Yeah.
It's only later that you sort of realise, oh, that makes a lot more sense than it was. You sort of learn to appreciate it a lot more.
Yeah, yeah. So then we cut to the United States in Georgetown, and I'm guessing a pretty successful actress.
Yeah, I presume. Yeah, she's clearly a star.
Yeah, she's clearly the star of the film, or at least the star of the scene she's in, and she's in a scene where she's an activist. And while doing her scene, she sees a priest.
Yeah.
And sorry, so the actress is Chris McNeil is her name.
Yes. Played by Ellen Burstyn.
Yes, who's wonderful in this film.
Yes, absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely incredible.
Again, something that you don't appreciate when you're a kid, that how brilliant she really is the mother.
Yeah. It's also in this scene where we're introduced to an absolute dickhead, Burke Dennings, the film director, who later on is just so horrible in the party scene, which I guess we'll get to, but he's such a dick. Yeah. So she notices Damien Karras walking by. It's just kind of a I guess foreshadowing of what's to come, but she notices him while filming. And we're introduced to Karras. So Karras has a background in psychology, and also has this elderly mother who's on the verge of death. She's very close to death. She's not very well.
She's pretty much on the way out.
I think it's like dementia or something, isn't it? Because she kind of seems really out of it. And so he spends much of his time looking after her when he's not obviously, counseling parishioners or whatever he does. Doing priestly things, yes. So
Father Karras, obviously played by Jason Miller.
Yes, again,
I think he's another actor that I've only ever seen in like one or two other things. But
yeah, The Exorcist. He's in The Exorcist 3 for a minute.
He is. Yeah,
that's about it.
He's so great in this.
He's amazing. There's not. I don't think there's a bad performance in this film.
No.
That I'm aware of. I think it's perfectly cast, and it's a crying shame that some of these people didn't go on to more. You know. But yes, so we're introduced to Karras, and he's talking with his superiors, and he says that he's losing his faith. And
he's struggling with his faith, and he's struggling to come to terms with the fact that with modern life, and that his mother dying, and just generally the unpleasantness of being, I suppose, is just turning him from his faith. Yes,
and he also lives in quite a poor area anyway, doesn't he? He's not very well off, and his mother kind of lives in a, they both, does he live with his mother? I was never sure if he lives with his mother or whether he just visits a lot, but either way, it's not a very nice place. It's quite downtrodden.
I presume he doesn't live with her because of what happens to her. Yeah, it says that she wasn't found for a while.
That's right. Yes, you're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So yeah, maybe he doesn't.
I get the impression that he just lives on the wherever it is he works. He's probably got a room there, I think.
Yeah. So Karras is having his crisis of faith over his mother and whatnot, and we're then shown the McNeil household, and weird things are starting to happen, and red alarm immediately, because Reagan's been fucking around with a Ouija board. It's just like, where did you find that? Have you been playing with that? Yeah.
One of the things I've never understood about it's a sort of a difference between America and England. And in England, you couldn't get hold of a Ouija board.
No, especially not back then.
Really, whereas in America, it was almost like a party game over there.
Yeah, I mean, you can get them now, but in the 70s, I don't think you'd be able to get a Ouija board. You'd have to really, go some to try and find one because they were not readily available. But you're right, it seems like, or at least in American movies, it seems like they're just there all the time. There's always always Ouija boards just lying around houses. So she's been playing with a Ouija board. And it's all quite, jovial and funny. And she is, what is the name? Is Mr. Happy or something like that, isn't it?
Captain Howdy.
Captain Howdy, that's right. So she's speaking to Captain Howdy.
Who sounds like the most innocuous, like, comic, cartoon character, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. He sounds quite an amusing kind of silly character. But obviously we know... it's hard to put myself in the 70s watching this film, because obviously a lot of this stuff, like playing with Ouija boards, the invisible friend, all that kind of stuff is so cliched now. But obviously it wouldn't necessarily have been when this film came out, so it probably would have had much more of an impact. So she's been talking to or communicating with Captain Howdy. And we find,
and we should say, of course, Regan, played by Linda Blair, and they brilliantly cast quite possibly the most chutchy-faced, sweetest-looking girl they could possibly find.
She is like the most adorable girl. And I mean, she is just so happy, isn't she? She's so happy, and you like rewatching the film when you know what happens to her. You can't help but just be like, oh.
Yeah.
She's just like, all she wanted was a horse. That's like, They do
such a great job of setting up the family dynamic as well.
They do.
You really feel that this is an actual family that love each other, and they've got the sort of the absent dad who's obviously, I think you only ever hear him on the phone, don't you? Or if you hear him at all.
Yeah. He's wherever he is, he's not in this film.
Yeah. So they have this brilliant relationship that you completely believe.
So, a nearby church is desecrated, and a statue of Mary is modified.
Beautifully, I must say.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
As desecrations go, it's one of the most creatives I've seen.
They spent some time working on it. They did. You cannot fault their effort on that.
Usually, when you see someone desecrate an altar, they just put, they just tip things up, spray paint it, and put crap on it or something like that. This one's full on, like, altered the statue.
Yeah. So yes. And then Father Karras's mother falls ill and ends up being placed in an old shabby hospital. In a ward full of mental patients, which we will, come back to one day in The Exorcist Part 3, which kind of deals a lot more with the mental ward. The thing is, I've seen The Exorcist a few times over the years. I went to the cinema when it was re-released and all that, Yes, I did, yeah.
But I think I've only ever seen the sequels once each.
Right, well, I would say...
And I remember the
crap.
second one... Yeah, I remember the second one being terrible.
The 3's great.
And I remember 3's good, but that's all I remember, and I've never seen the prequels, so... Yeah,
the prequels aren't great. One, they're basically the same story as well, awkwardly.
Yeah, they were just remade, weren't... Well, one was... there was the story about that is interesting, about the
it is.
They made the first one, and then they were like, we don't think it's a terribly good movie. We'd like you to rewrite. We asked somebody else to rewrite it and stuff. But yeah, okay. So they gave them a smaller budget, and then they redid it. So
And annoyingly, it's one of those things where anyone says about the Exorcist prequels, I always say, one of them's better than the other, but I can never remember which one, so I don't know which one to suggest to people, because I'm like, I know one of them's better, but they're both very similar, so it's difficult to remember. But The Exorcist Part 3 is well worth a watch, and it uses a lot of characters from The Exorcist, or a few at least, to kind of bolster its cast.
I'm gonna have to go back to them.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. So yeah, Father Karras's mother is ill, placed in a hospital, and Father Karras is extremely upset because, as a lot of parents do in this situation, she blames him for where she is in her situation.
Why are you doing this to me?
Yeah.
which is even worse for his religious guilt.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not helping at all with his crisis of faith.
And then, of course, later she passes away, which completely crushes him, and presumably shakes his faith even further. Yeah, it's again, I know we've talked about this on the show a few times in the past. It's that tell a small, simple story just really well, and that's all this is. And every character in this just feels really nicely fleshed out, and you can understand everyone's motivations, everyone's reasons. It's just lovely. It's a lovely, simple story. And so often those are the good, those are the good films, the simple stories. So Chris puts on this ridiculous party at her house. I guess it's just kind of like, look how rich we are. Come to our house, rich people.
Typical decadent sort of, movie stars and stuff party.
Yes, yeah.
Like singing along to the piano and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it was like, look at my grand piano, let's do a sing along. And we realise here that Burke Dennings is an absolute asshole when he's just constantly having a go at this German guest, calling him a Nazi. He's really horrible to this guy, and the guy's just like, you can see the rage building in this guy, and then finally in the kitchen he's like, I am going to murder you. Like, I've absolutely had enough. All quite funny, and quite it's another one of those wonderful moments in a film where it lulls you into a false sense of security. And we're just having fun at a party.
Well, it's even though it's a sort of a high class party, it's still mundane. It's still
Absolutely.
Setting up. These are normal things. It's nothing strange going on here. It's just an average sort of party for them.
Yeah. So she meets Father Dyer at the party. Either she meets him at the bar. I guess she already knew him because she invited him to the party. Or he just turned up. He just gate crashed the party.
I presume he must just. I think there's a big thing in sort of like richer circles in that there's usually a priest there somewhere.
Right.
I think
it's just one of those things. It's good to know a priest.
Yeah. I think whenever you see sort of stuff like, I guess in like 70s and before, there's almost every party there's bound to be some sort of religious dude there somewhere.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. And I know a lot of priests are quite well off as well, so I guess that kind of makes sense. So she's introduced to Father Dyer, and she does ask about Karras, and he kind of says like, hey, he's an intense dude.
He's really intense.
Yeah.
Of course, Father Dyer was played by William O'Malley, who was an actual priest.
Yes, he was an actual priest, wasn't he? I was watching. I watched a documentary on The Exorcist yesterday after I watched the movie, and he's in that, and I was like, oh, I was like, well, he's going all out for this documentary. He's dressed in his priestly robes just for the. And then I realised, no, he's actually a priest. I can't believe he went along with this movie.
He was a teacher at a Jesuit school, I think, if I remember rightly.
Yeah. Cannot believe they got him to go along with this.
That was one of the things about this movie, to do with the priest stuff, is that, that they had priests visit the set. There was, and if anything, it did really well for the Catholic Church.
What you'd imagine, right? It's the kind of thing that on the surface you'd think they'd be against, but in reality, it probably ended up elevating Catholicism quite high.
More. Or people would watch the movie and then go straight to church. It really did help them.
Yeah, just run out of the theatre screaming and then straight into the cathedral next door. Across the road, just opposite sides of the road. So Regan seems very happy and whatnot at the party. She's social and just being adorable, like you said. She's just adorably cute. But then later that night, when they're in the middle of their sing-song around the piano, she reappears and urinates on the carpet.
Yeah.
And also says,
"You're all gonna die, isn't it?
You're gonna die up there." Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, oh, okay. That's
Doesn't
not
she say?
normal.
I think she says it to an astronaut, doesn't she?
Oh, is that what? Is
I
it
think
the
it's an astronaut, and she says you're going to die up there to the astronaut. I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it also works on multiple levels because obviously everything in the movie happens upstairs as well. So it's kind of on two levels. You're going to die up there. So after the guests leave, Chris obviously takes Regan back to bed. I think, is this the scene where they have the conversation in the bathroom as well, don't they? She bathes her and they're kind of saying like what happened, and she's not really talking. And then as soon as she puts her to bed, she hears a very loud rocking and noise from upstairs, runs upstairs and finds the bed shaking ridiculously. And this kind of plays in to what happens next. So she finds the bed, and it is literally like rising off the floor with Regan on it, to the point that Chris jumps on the bed, and it's still the whole bed shaking.
Which, and I mean that. Let's say it, but that the bedroom set is fantastic. It's, I mean, they built it with the sort of the seesaw mechanism for the bed to move it up and down, and it was built in a fridge. Obviously that's later, but it was built in a fridge that you could see their breath and stuff, and
that's so effective as well. That breath stuff, as soon as they step through the door, you get it immediately. It's just it's incredible, so incredible. Yeah. But you're right, that whole set is fantastic, and I guess again it pays that most of the film happens there. That's your like pivotal set. So they've put all of their time and effort into that set, and it works perfect.
That's also, it feeds into that whole mundanity of the whole thing. It's like, this is just a it's not a haunted house. It's not a sort of gothic mansion or anything like that. From that you would see in like previous horror movies. It's just a normal domestic bedroom. There's nothing other than that about it. Yeah.
So as a result of this, Chris, I guess trying to be rational, is saying like, oh, it must be a medical thing, it must be like a seizure or something like that, and she takes Regan for a bunch of medical tests, which are horrible to watch. They're really like, they really make a point of how painful and horrible these.
There's a lot of people were actually more disturbed by the tests she goes through.
It's all than quite the horrible
religious stuff. Because I mean, when she gets the thing in the neck, it's like, oh Jesus, that's like brutal.
And every the thing in the neck, every injection, it's all just really nasty. When they take the blood going through the thing,
how much of an actress she is as well. By you genuinely feel her pain through all these.
for sure. And I mean, how old was she when she made this film? I'm not even sure how old she was.
I don't remember.
She couldn't have been very old. But I mean, it's a
character's 12, but I can't remember how old she was.
I mean, she must have been around that age. I can't imagine she was much older than that.
No,
because I know I remember the in the documentary she was saying that when you get to the crucifix masturbation scene, that she had no idea what she was doing. She was just doing this thing, and she didn't know until much later what she was actually doing. So she couldn't have been much older than 12, 13-ish, young enough to where they're not going to explain these things. And they're just going to be like, oh, do this silly thing for a bit, So, these tests are horrible. And the doctors come up with the theory that it must be a lesion on the brain. And Chris is just like, fuck off. Like, it is not that.
I think that's another good thing about these scenes as well, is that all the tests and throughout all this, it's a long sequence of stuff.
It is, yeah.
And I think, but it's not boring. It's never sort of. In some movies, this would be done in such a way that it would drag, make the film drag. This doesn't. You're totally. Well, I certainly am. I think same as most people. I think you're completely with them on this. You're involved.
Yeah.
I think it's done really well.
It really is. And you really feel Chris's absolute frustration with these goddamn
Yeah.
doctors, and you feel it for the doctors. They're trying their best, right?
Well, I think that's one thing I do think I remember from the book, if I'm right, is that I think in the book, Chris has previously had a kid that died.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't. That's not in the film, but
I
I'm
don't
sure in the
know,
book.
unless they mentioned it and I missed it, but I don't remember them saying that.
Yeah, I don't think it's in the film, but I'm sure in the book it mentions that she had a kid before that died, and I think it kind of sets up that she's suspicious of doctors.
Well, that kind of I kind of wish they'd put that in the film actually, because that kind of adds to this scene now. So the doctors are convinced that it's a lesion. They do all these scans and ultimately find nothing. They do a brain scan. She's got no lesion, nothing there. Perfectly healthy brain, as far as they can tell. But try and persist with this. But Regan then has what starts to look like a seizure. So the doctors are called, and the two doctors come visit Regan at the house, where they find that it's probably not a seizure. Probably not.
Gives it away.
So she's basically rising and falling from the bed, which is kind of it doesn't sound like it, but if you see the scene, it's not really physically positive. It's just a really, it would be quite crazy for a human to be doing that.
I mean that's one hell of a seizure if that's a
totally. Yeah. And then when they try to sedate her, she throws them across the room with like super strength, or seemingly for such a small girl, a 12-year-old girl. She throws two men across the room, and then says in a male voice, "Keep away. Sow is mine."
The sow is mine. Yeah. Which again, so we get the first sort of the introduction of the demon, which was done by Mercedes McCambridge, who was an actress who was quite big in the 50s and 60s. She was in Giant.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was in Giant and Johnny Guitar. So she was quite a big actress before, and she had drinking problems.
Oh, really?
And well, the thing is to make give the voice that she wanted, she actually drank again.
Oh my goodness!
She basically just started drinking again to get the voice right, and she'd sort of gargle stuff and smoke to get her voice right, and to get everything as it should be. She actually had herself tied down.
Wow.
So she was tied down while she's doing the voice for the demon,
just to get into that character completely, and really
use all the noises of her moving in the chair so they could use it for her. That's
amazing. A wonderful performance though, and it really does work.
Fantastic performance. Yeah. Probably again another voice that's been so emulated by other movies throughout. It doesn't get much better than that. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So having seen this, the best the doctors can do is suggest a psychiatrist. Although they do also suggest that maybe it is demonic possession. Although they do say it's like. Yeah, not sure, but this could be, I mean, we're throwing it out there now. I mean, after what they've just seen, I guess they're like, well, we don't have the answer. These are your two options, really, at this point. And because they seem to kind of almost hold possession in kind of contempt, which you'd expect from a doctor, I guess. They're like, we're men of science. And but they're out of options, and they've just seen something ridiculous.
They've seen that, and it's like, well, we don't know what the hell it is. Maybe they do. I don't know. It's literally that sort of thing, isn't it? It's maybe they've got the answers that we really don't have.
Yeah. So I guess Chris, I think isn't religious, is she? Which is kind of
No,
a key point of the movie. She's not religious.
That's, yeah, and I think that's part of the early setup as well. When you see her in certain places and things, when she first spots Merrin, not Merrin, Karis.
Karis, yeah.
And you see other religious figures walking around. I think there's a bit with nuns and stuff. All those things are in the distance. They're all away from where she is.
Yes. Yes.
So it's setting up that that's not part of her world at all. She both her and Regan are not religious in any way.
Yet.
Yes. Yeah.
So things get even worse when Chris is out one evening, returns to the house, and finds it completely deserted, except for Regan, who's in a room, and this is where she's in a deep sleep, but we get the cold in the room now. So as you were talking about the refrigerated room, she steps in and immediately that wonderful visual of the cold coming from Chris's mouth. Is this where she opens the shirt? I can't remember.
No, I think that's a bit later.
Is that later? It may be later. Sorry,
I can't.
A lot of this film happens in a bedroom, so trying to remember the sequence of events in the bedroom is quite difficult. I got Wikipedia open, and I'm kind of like trying to piece it together. What was the film we did? What did we do the last time before last? What were we covering?
With the
wasn't Indiana Jones. It's before that.
No, it was Highlander.
Highlander. Wikipedia Highlander is awful because it doesn't do anything in the right order, and I was like, oh no, I'm completely lost now because I can't remember where we were. So she's obviously freezing cold, and the window's wide open, and Regan is apparently all alone in this freezing cold room,
I think you may be right about the actual the stomach thing. Maybe you're right.
I can't remember which way. I can't remember. At some point, there's writing on her stomach that says "Help me."
Which is brilliant.
It's amazing. It's an amazing effect as well because it slowly rises. It may be later or it may be here. I'm not entirely sure. Oh no, actually, I think it is later because this is the one when she's angry at Burke, isn't she? For not being there because he was supposed to be there. I think Sharon comes back and Chris is like, "How dare you leave Regan unattended?" And Sharon says, "No, she like Regan was left with Burke. That's he was visiting the house. I went out to wherever the shops or whatever. And I think she was getting medication for Regan. Actually, she was like getting medication.
That's right,
and Burke's disappeared, but he was supposed to be looking after Regan. And then of course. That's when the doorbell rings and we discover that Burke has died on the steps. So there are steps right outside of Regan's bedroom and a big
quite possibly the most iconic steps in cinema history.
Yeah, and according to the documentary, apparently kids in the neighborhood were selling tickets to watch the stunt at the end of the movie. So they were selling tickets to go up on their roofs to watch the stunt, which I totally would have paid for if I was there at the time. So Burke's died on the steps outside the house, and I think they kind of at this point they're like, oh well, it was he must have been drunk or just silly or I don't know. I guess your brain tries to rationalize things, doesn't it? Or it was suicide. Who knows? But shortly after this, she is visited by Kinderman, the detective who is a prominent, the lead of The Exorcist 3, played by a different character there. He's played by Lee J. Cobb here.
Yes. I did not remember that he was the same character in the third one.
Yeah, George C. Scott plays him in the Exorcist 3, but it is Kinderman.
I didn't realise it was. Okay.
And they have that kind of. That's why he was Karis's friend, and it's a little contrived in that way because like they are friends in this movie, but not for very long. So it's kind of like, but they kind of make out that they were friends for a little longer, I think.
I think one thing I do I think I remember rightly in the book. Is that I think it's suggested that Burke is molesting Regan.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm pretty certain that he's molesting her in the
Well,
book.
he is thoroughly
Oh,
awful
he's
in this
horrible.
movie, but they
Yeah,
don't make out that. They don't really even hint at that, I
no,
don't think. So,
no.
interesting.
But I think he is in the book.
Okay. That's interesting. But yeah, they didn't go with that in the movie, as far as I can see. The detective, and this is a shot I really love. The detective's at the bottom of the steps, and he pulls out this figure or model that's been made, and it's heavily insinuated that this was made by Regan, because Regan is she's into crafts and she makes stuff.
Yeah.
And while visiting Chris's house, Kinderman notices that there are these little animal statues.
Similar to this, yeah.
And he asks, like, he's like, "Who's the artist?" And Chris is like, "Is it Regan?" He's like, "Yeah, it's Regan." And what I love about that is that it kind of insinuates that either it was thrown from the window,
Yeah.
maybe with him,
Yep.
or that she's somehow gotten out and done that purposely.
Yeah.
As kind of because throughout this film, Pazuzu does kind of bait people and play with people.
Yeah.
And it's another part of that game of like
his whole MO, isn't it? It's to do with lies and
yes, yeah,
messing with people's heads.
Yeah. So yeah, so as soon as Kinderman leaves, there's another violent disturbance from the bedroom, and Chris then hears the male voice of "Do it," with Regan screaming in, she's just distraught. She sounds distraught, but then there's this male voice, shouting as well. So Chris obviously thinks there's someone up there, runs upstairs and finds Regan. So she finds Regan with the crucifix, basically stabbing herself in her vagina, effectively.
Violently masturbating
with a crucifix. This had to be,
which is still one of the most horrific.
It's still one of the most shocking scenes. I rewatched it yesterday night, and I was like, even at my age, I was like, wow. Even now, that's shocking. I can't even imagine in the theaters.
In a way, it's good that it's still.
Well, yeah, I guess it is. But I just think, as desensitized as we are these days, I can't even imagine in the 70s watching this in the cinema. People must have just. Well, you can see why people left the cinema and were just like, "Oh my goodness, this is too much."
And not only that, the things she says, makes. It's not what you usually hear 12-year-olds saying. I hope you don't hear 12-year-olds saying.
No.
Probably more so these days, but you certainly wouldn't have in the 70s.
No, absolutely. So she's obviously saying, "Let Jesus fuck you," and fuck me, and things like this. I will say though, I guess upon rewatch, I couldn't help but laugh at the Burke's voice saying, "Do you know what she did, your cunting daughter?" I don't know why, it just made me laugh. But obviously this is the realization then to Chris that Regan was probably responsible for killing Burke. So this then makes Chris desperate enough that she's going to go meet with Father Karras.
Yeah.
And Karras is like, I don't know if amused is the right word, but he's like dismissive at best of the notion of exorcism. He's like, no, come on. He says it's almost unheard of. And he doesn't know anyone.
He's a priest. He's a very rational man.
Well, and he's almost lost his faith as well.
Yeah, exactly.
On top of that, you've not only got someone who's a rational man, but also someone that's almost lost their faith. I mean, to accept the presence of demonic possession, you have to have faith, right? They're both absolutely intertwined. So, yeah, he's like, it's nearly unheard of, and he doesn't know anyone that's ever performed an exorcism in all of his time as a priest.
Yeah.
But Chris is distraught and convinces him to meet Regan anyway. And obviously, Karis is also a psychologist. So he's kind of, perhaps you can help from this angle. And Karis does that. And by this time, she's now tied to the bed. Having obviously what's happened recently, she's been tied to the bed to stop herself, to stop her from self-harming, effectively.
Yeah.
And her face is misshapen and covered in cuts. And apparently, in the original plan was that she would cut her out. The idea was that she cut her face with the cross, with the crucifix.
Right.
But obviously now it's also misshapen. And it's starting to get more. I think it gets worse and worse, doesn't it, through the movie?
Yeah, it does. It gets more and more sort of like
demonic
and yeah,
gross. Yeah.
Yeah.
So her voice is really deep at this point as well, and she basically tells Karis that she is straight up the devil. And
when do we get have we missed the hypnotism scene?
Oh,
is that before?
You might be right.
I think because I think we get there's a scene with that where they hypnotize her, isn't there? I think that's before they strap her to the bed.
You're right. I think we did miss that. So there is, yes, you're right. I think so. There is a scene where they tried to hypnotize Regan.
Yeah. Because one of the things that sticks with me about that scene is when he asks the demon to come forth, you can almost smell and taste the smell that comes. It's like the whole they're all like, oh my god, what is that smell? that is disgusting. And so you do get the sort of the fact that it isn't just the fact that she's having these things. There are things happening. She's bringing smells and she's affecting the atmosphere as well.
Well, yeah, and obviously she affects the air, the temperature, and everything like that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
she also crushes the poor doctor's testicles at that point as well.
She does, yes, you're right. In fact, that may have all been part of the same scene back there that we missed earlier.
Yeah.
I think you're right. So, she announces that she's the devil to Karis, and makes a drawer open by itself, and starts speaking in a number of languages. And also, she uses the voice of the vagrant that Karis had met in the subway.
Yeah, can you help an old altar boy out, Father?
That's right. Yeah. So she repeats that line. Although, despite all of this, Karis is not convinced.
Yeah.
I suppose probably. I mean, for one thing, I'd be pretty convinced that something was going on at this point. But I guess for him, like, claiming to be a demon is one thing. Claiming to be the devil is like ludicrous.
Yeah, exactly. That's like it's the old upping the ante so much it's ridiculous.
It's ludicrous. But of course, as we said, that's very much Pazuzu's thing in this movie is playing with people. And I guess ultimately Karis isn't the one that Pazuzu wants. Pazuzu wants this rematch. So Karis is not the right priest, basically.
But I do think it's also he is the right priest because he's already, almost to the point. He wants to affect as many lives as possible.
Yeah.
So that's why it's why he uses his mother.
So Regan actually then says in this scene, doesn't she? She says your mother's in here with us. Your mother's
here with us.
Karis then asks for the maiden name. And doesn't get an answer. So again, I like that, the lack of answer. He's still playing. Pazuzu's still playing. Yeah, he's not going to give all the details. He's not going to say everything. So all he gets in response is pea soup to the face.
Which is great because what I love about that scene is his reaction is so genuine because
it was genuine. Yeah.
The device misfired.
Yeah.
It was supposed to hit him in the chest.
Yeah.
And it full on hit him in the face.
They apparently did several takes after that were correct. They redressed him and did it again. But ultimately they were like, that's such a natural reaction. It's perfect.
It doesn't get better.
It's one of the few things in the movie that I think I'd change is the color of the sick. It's always
makes it.
It's a bit cartoony, you know. I think if it was like red or brown, it would have been way more gross.
It's pea soup, isn't it? I think
it's literally pea soup. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, that's what they use. They use pea soup, and I think I agree with that. I think if they made it slightly less green, it might have been better. But
maybe use tomato soup or oxtail.
I guess that would make it more bloody, and I guess they didn't want to make it.
They were pushing their luck already, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, or make it brown. I think maybe brown would have been a better color. But either way, it's a nitpick. It's about my only criticism that I have of this film, if I'm honest with you. So Chris then cleans his sweater, which I guess is the least she could have done, considering what's just happened. And they have the discussion about Reagan. Karis is still not convinced that Reagan's possessed, especially because she said she's the bloody devil. And he recommends psychiatric care. But Chris is having none of that.
No, she says it's, that thing up there is not my daughter. I know my daughter, and that is not my daughter.
Such a powerful line. That thing up there is not my daughter. So Karis is kind of thinking it over when he's approached by Kinderman. And questions about the church desecration, and that it could... Oh, that's right. It could be connected to Burke's death because Regan's figures were quite similar to the defacing of Mary.
Of Mary.
That's right. So that's why that's the link. I was trying to think while I was going through this. I was like, but I can't remember what the link was. If it gets Kinderman to Karis, so that's what it is. So he thinks he's connected to Burke's death, and he says that Burke's body was found with his head completely turned around backwards, which they think is pretty much impossible. I mean, 1 in a million if he'd fallen from the stairs that this could have happened. And that they think they're considering it a homicide. Kinderman says, he knows that Karis suspects something unusual's going on at the house, but obviously Karis has got to keep his confidentiality, so he refuses to say anything. Then Karis tries to play games, so he visits Regan and records their conversation, and then throws water on her, which he claims to be holy water.
Holy water.
Which causes Regan to writhe in pain and agony, and start screaming and shouting in what seems to be a strange language. But later, obviously, he says to Chris that, it was just water. It's tap water.
Tap water, yeah.
It was not blessed. So, further adding to Karis's suspicions that it's probably fake.
Yeah.
So they kind of consider Reagan to just be mentally ill and not possessed. She then says to Karis that she thinks that it was probably Reagan that killed Burke. And later, Karis discovers, I think he takes it somewhere, doesn't he? He discovers that the recordings on the tape are actually English backwards.
Yeah.
I guess he sends it off for some kind of analysis, and they come back and they say it is a language. It's English in reverse.
Yeah.
So they. Oh yeah, that's right. Yes, and then he gets a phone call from Sharon, and that's when we get the "Help Me" on the stomach, because he sees the "Help Me" appear rising, and it's a wonderful shot where it just seems to. I don't know whether it's like a crossfade or what they did with that, but it does seem to rise from the stomach. Or it could just be a practical thing. I don't know.
I think it was done backwards. I think it was.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I think it was like melted on her.
Yeah.
So that it was, and then they filmed. They played it backwards, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's incredible, and the score in that, the score in this whole movie is amazing. But that moment is it's like got that real sort of cutting sound.
Yeah.
So Karis basically at this point is like, okay,
again taken from Nightmare on Elm Street basically used a similar sort of thing.
Very similar, yeah.
With the Freddy cuts in the first one.
In the stomach, yeah. I'd say it's done a lot more effectively here than there.
Yes.
Although it matches Freddy's personality a lot more, the way it cuts and kind of,
Yeah.
But yes. So Karis is like, okay, I guess it's time for an exorcism after all.
Maybe there is something in this.
Maybe we should. So he decides to agree to an exorcism for Regan. Although he doesn't he recommend? Don't they recommend shock therapy as well?
I think so. Yeah, they at some point they definitely recommend shock therapy because they still think it's a brain thing.
Yeah, but in any case, he agrees to do it. And the church calls Father Merrin. To perform the exorcism with Karis assisting. I guess because Karis is just not. I guess. Unbeknownst to Karis, but Merrin has history with this. He's done this before.
It's suggested that Merrin has done exorcisms before.
Yeah. It's and certainly with the stuff in Africa, if that's canon, then yes, he's definitely done it before. So they want Merrin to perform the exorcism. And Merrin says that he has done exorcisms in the past, including a very difficult one that nearly killed him.
Yeah.
Which I guess is heavily implied to have been Pazuzu the first time. So Merrin arrives at the house and immediately we hear the demonic voice shout Merrin's name from upstairs. The second he steps in the house. Pazuzu's got what he wants.
You've got but when you have the one of the most most iconic pictures in cinema history, the him arriving at the threshold of the gate, and the light coming down.
Absolutely.
Which is the cover, which is again how many walls has been adorned with that picture?
Oh, for sure, it's one of the most iconic pictures in cinema. Oh, that's a point. I must backtrack for a brief moment to say how much I adore that really disturbing dream sequence where Karis sees his mother.
Oh yes!
And then the face appears.
That's actually one of my favourite scenes.
It's amazing.
There's very little sound, and she comes up from the subway.
And she's speaking, and he can't hear what she's saying, and
he's trying to get to the road to get to her, and it's such a brilliantly done.
It's horrible
little scene. It's so
nothing's really happening, but it's just really disturbing. Yeah, and you do get that split second of the demon appearing, but
the white face. Yeah, that is a great scene. I love that scene.
I can't believe we missed that. I think that was further back somewhere. I think it was when he was unsure. I think he was still trying to decide at that point when he was having his crisis.
It's another sign of his faith going that he blames himself for not being there for his mother and the whole the suggestion of her going back into the subway is like a oh god, it's like she's going down. I think it actually it's a great picture.
I think it's just before they find her dead, isn't it? Because I think the next scene is like, oh, she's dead. I think that might be where he has that dream. It's like just before she's found dead is when he has that that amazing dream sequence. But yes,
we should also mention, of course, Tubular Bells, which is like one of the greatest albums ever made.
It's an amazing song,
and as a soundtrack, it's just stunning. It's so iconically used.
Maybe the most iconic horror soundtrack, right? I mean, that theme. I mean, as soon as anyone plays that theme, you know exactly what it is.
Yeah, I think it's right up there with the Halloween music. I think is the most iconic.
I'd agree. It's between the two, isn't it? Between the two for sure. So Yes, Merrin is now at the house, and Pazuzu has got what he wants. He's got the showdown, the rematch, and we hear strange animal noises and sounds from upstairs. And this is where Merrin warns Karis, and this is where we as the audience learn that, you know, if you're conversing with a demon, it will lie, and it will mix truth with lies and confuse you in attacking you, which is where we kind of realize why it was saying, "Oh, I'm the devil," and all of this stuff, and refusing to answer.
And Karis says, let me tell you about the history and stuff. And there are I think there are 3 personalities, and he says, nope, no, there are one. There is just one.
It's trying to confuse you.
Just yeah, exactly. It will do anything it can to confuse the hell out of you.
Yeah. So they enter the bedroom, and again we get that wonderful cold immediately, and they look so gaunt and cold in this scene. Like they really look immediately. They get frozen and just
it's all
ill.
tinged with blue, isn't it? It's got that sort of like it makes everything look colder.
It really does. The color grading changes dramatically at this point. So Maris,
I also love the story that Max von Sydow went on his first day of filming. Hearing the swear words coming out of the girl so shocked him that he completely forgot his lines.
Which, you know, for a seasoned actor like that, it must take quite a shock to make you actually forget your lines and you know, mess up that way. But it must have been shocking. I mean, especially 73, I guess 71, 72 when they were filming it.
You have heard you certainly would have heard a girl say those things in back then.
No. And I mean, Friedkin himself was like a real dick on set, trying to get people scared and trying to get people messed up. Apparently, he brought a gun to set and shot the gun every now and again randomly.
He fired a gun right next to Jason Miller's head, I think it was at one point.
Yeah.
And Miller said, "Look, I'm an actor. I don't need
no, I don't need this kind of motivation.
I don't need prompting to act surprised, you know."
Yeah. But either way, I mean, you know, it may not be conventional, but he certainly either, you know, I mean, the cast are very talented anyway, but he certainly got the best out of them here. So Merrin and Karis start to recite the exorcism ritual, and this is where we get. Is this where we get that wonderful shot of her in the bed with backlit with Pazuzu's statue to the side? So. A wonderful image, another iconic image of this film. And we start getting levitation, telekinesis. We get the tongue shot here, and more vomiting. Lots more vomiting.
Lots more vomiting, yeah.
She's like constantly swearing and cursing and laughing and hurling abuse at them as they go, trying everything that he can to distract and to kind of screw up their ceremony as they try to exorcise him. And then Regan begins, Pazuzu through Regan begins to talk to Karis in the voice of his mother, which causes him to break down and lose his concentration. Causing Merrin to send him away.
Yeah, Merrin says basically, you know, leave the room. I'll get the. You can't be here for this sort of thing if you're getting distracted by him, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Karis goes to kind of regain his composure, and then when he comes back, he finds Merrin dead, who apparently died of a heart attack or something. As a side note, I watched on the weekend. I watched What Dreams May Come.
Okay.
And the Robin Williams movie, and Max von Sydow is in that as the tracker, I think he is. And I was like, maybe he's the same character. Like after he died, he's in the spirit world, and then he's like the tracker for Robin Williams.
I didn't remember him that, actually.
Yeah, he plays the guy that they go. He takes them to hell to find her, to find his wife, because obviously his wife's in hell. He needs to go and find her. And Max von Sydow's character, the tracker, is the person they go to hell. He takes them to hell, and he's like, "I can find her for you, but you will never get any sense out of her. She's too far gone. But yeah, he plays that character, and he's like very much kind of almost dressed like Father Karras as well. So I like to think once he died here, that's where he went, and But anyway,
that movie got a lot of shit.
I love that movie. It's really it's depressing as all hell, but it's really nice.
I remember
it's beautiful.
really liking it as well. Yeah.
It's a beautiful film. The visuals in that film are incredible. But anyway, so Merrin is dead, unfortunately, and Regan is kind of laughing, which obviously upsets Karras, who starts basically grabbing her and shouting at her to come into him. He's like, come into me, like take me, and almost immediately he does. So he immediately transfers himself from Regan into Karras.
You get the flash of his face when you see the movement.
And I think you see his eyes as well, don't they? His eyes start going a bit weird.
Yeah, his eyes go. I think they go. Do they go yellow? I think it was. They change anyway. He definitely alters when it moves over. And I think this is the point where he realizes that no, this is he regains his full faith at this point. It's like, no, I know what's going on. I know what I have to do, and this is what I have to do.
So the possession is almost it's heavily implied that Pazuzu is about to possess him and gain full control when his faith is so powerful that for a split moment he is able to regain control of himself, which is when he commits suicide, jumping out of Regan's window and falling down those iconic stairs, just like Burke did previously in the movie, and dies in a horrendous scene. I mean, when he's lying on the floor and they're taking the last confessions, when he's just on the floor and unmoving apart from his bloodied hand, which keeps grasping at Father Dyer. As he's just bleeding out on the floor, taking his last rites. A really harrowing, horrible scene, surrounded by strangers. I guess it was quite a busy street down there. Because there's a lot of people kind of gathered around. Absolutely very moving and horrendous scene. Although I guess we know that he's at peace and that he's regained his faith. And has taken Pazuzu with him in theory. Obviously, Exorcist Part 3 sort of retcons that somewhat. But, in theory, he managed to contain Pazuzu and then kill his vessel.
Yeah. So that it's like he's taking him with him, sort of thing.
Yeah. And then of course we get the epilogue, and we see that Chris, who did mention previously in the movie she was going to move house, her and Regan are preparing to leave the house, and they're visited by Father Dyer. She speaks to Dyer and says, Regan remembers nothing of the exorcism or the possession, and she's just happy. She's got a few scars that are kind of healing on her face, you can see. And what I love about this scene is that they clearly only intended to make one film. They weren't planning on a sequel. No. There's no sequel baiting here at all, and I love it because you get a wonderful shot of Regan, who's back to her cheerful self. She is momentarily transfixed by the collar, Father Dyer's collar, but then immediately runs up and hugs and kisses him. Almost like she kind of remembers something, or she at least is now of faith, I guess. She's now...
I think that's... it's definitely an affirmation of faith, I think, for both her and her mother, I think. Yeah.
And then Chris then pulls away in their car. She gets in the car, they pull away. And then she tells the driver to stop and gives Father Dyer the medallion that belonged to Karras, which was lost in the struggle before Karras died. And there we have it, The Exorcist. It was difficult to kind of almost make much of a comment. I feel like I haven't really commented on this film other than talk through it. There's just nothing I've got to say that's really negative or kind of... It's just so good. It's just such a good movie.
I think negative-wise in this now, I think the
The
problem
pea
you
soup.
have. Yeah, I think the problem you have with The Exorcist now is that there have been so many movies that have stolen from it, or have been parodies of it,
Yeah.
or that have come along and have done sort of stuff with it,
Yeah.
that I think they've kind of watered the impact down somewhat.
I think they have.
'Cause
I guess the good thing
I
is that
think
for
more.
us, it wasn't that way because although
No,
obviously I wasn't around in '73,
yeah,
I saw it. It was it was the first Exorcist film that I remember seeing. A film with an
yes,
exorcism in
absolutely.
it. This is the first
Yeah.
one, and I saw it way too young, like you, so it had the right impact.
And I think the more people have probably seen things like Repossessed and those bloody awful scary
Scary movies.
things.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that I think the impact is definitely lessened.
Mm.
But I think it's for me, it certainly still holds up as one of the greatest horror movies ever made.
It really does, and every time I rewatch it, I'm struck by a couple of things, and that is that I'm always struck by how much it's held up. It's held up remarkably well, because it's just a use of practical effects sparingly. They do these things where they need them, and I'm also struck by that opening 15 minutes. Because I always forget it's there, and then I rewatch it, and I'm like, "Oh, this is amazing! This opening is incredible." Because I always just remember, you always remember the shocking scenes, like the crucifix scene and the head turning around, and
Well, those things are pretty much seared into your brain after
They
you've
are.
seen them. They're like things that you can't unsee once they're there.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But it's always wonderful when you go back to this film and you realize, no, there is that greater story and that introduction to Merrin, which I think is wonderful in Iraq.
Yeah.
But what a film! What a film!
Yeah,
A near
and,
perfect horror movie.
I love little stories about when it came out and stuff, and you hear about that certainly in England some councils banned it, and I love the stories about like coach firms were hiring. Basically advertising that they will take you to the next town where it's being shown.
Yeah, we would drive you to where you can.
It would drive you to where you can see it, which I think is fantastic. I love that.
Incredible.
That is brilliant.
But
And
yeah,
there's a story that Ellen Burstyn tells about how she when the movie was just coming out, she was filming another film somewhere else, and she thought, I'll just go into a cinema and watch it. So she started watching it, and then one of the audience started having a panic attack and left, and she went to sort of help her, and I think she sort of fainted, and she was there sort of like helping resuscitate her, and of course the woman woke up, and of course
saw the actress.
Who should she see but the actress above her, and completely started freaking out, and so she had to go and find someone else to help this poor woman because she was making it worse.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, such an iconic, almost perfect film. I think it is pretty much perfect, to be honest. I like I said, the pea soup is a nitpick.
Yeah.
And other than that, I really have no criticism. For me, this and Alien really stand as like just perfection when it comes to horror movies for me.
Yeah.
I mean, there are obviously different categories of horror movies and different genres of horror movies. But in terms of iconic horror movies, for me, these are the two that really sort of stand out. Besides the classic Universal horror run, these are the ones that I kind of think.
Well, I mean, it's never been bettered. It's
certainly in its genre, the exorcism genre, never.
No exorcism movie has ever come near it.
And I've seen some good ones. I thought Emily Rose was pretty good.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah, Emily Rose is a good one.
There's a few, but none have ever come close to this ever.
No. Absolutely not. And I think it's a complete combination of one, taking the material seriously, and two, the fantastic performances by everybody involved.
Yeah, I mean everyone in it's amazing.
And that's it. It's I think it was just completely a huge combination of factors. Right place, right time.
Absolutely.
It's just perfect for what it is and for when it came out.
Yeah, it really, really is. Yeah, so that was The Exorcist, and the only other thing I'd say is I wouldn't bother wasting your time with Exorcist Part 2. But part three's fine.
I know it's rubbish, but I'm kind of intrigued. I still want to go back and see it again.
It's got its moments. It's just very long and dull and weird.
Because the other thing for me is it's got Richard Burton in, and I bloody love Richard Burton. So there's that makes me want to watch it a little bit more. And I know I will go back and watch the third one as well.
The third one, I genuinely enjoy. I think I've watched the third one in recent years more than I've watched the first one. I guess because I watched the first one so much, back in the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, The Exorcist Part 2's got its moments. I wouldn't say it's brilliant. I always remember James Earl Jones as the leader of the tribe that they keep saying.
Right.
It's a weird film. It's weird. It's very weird. And in some ways you're kind of like, well, they tried something different, and that's brave. They could have just done another Exorcist movie, same thing.
Yeah.
But they didn't, and they tried something new, and fair enough from that perspective. But no, I think The Exorcist Part 3 for me is the genuine sequel. For me,
yeah.
It feels like the genuine sequel. You've got Karis, you've got the Kinderman. It seems like a much more genuine sequel to me than the second one did. The Exorcist Part 3 is actually directed by the writer of The Exorcist as well. By Blatley.
Peter Blatley,
and I think he does a great job of that as well. So yeah, there we have it. The Exorcist, one of the best horror films ever made.
Absolutely.
So I guess next time we'll be back to our usual reviewing fare.
We will
try and watch some new movies. I know I've got the Train to Busan sequel here, so I'll give that a watch. I've heard some terrible things.
Yes, same here.
I'm hoping I like it anyway, but I have not heard good things. So
well, by the sounds of it, one thing it sounds like they've definitely gone for something different with this one. By the sounds of it,
is it going to be an Exorcist the Heretic situation?
I think, from what some people are saying, I think it might be.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll find out. But in any case, until next time, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next Wednesday.
Bye.